Debt is something that none of us get out of in our lives, as it comes in so many different forms. Already as a small kid, we tend to get into some type of a debt with our friends when we're doing a candy run to a local store and somebody forgot or lost their wallet on their way. When we think about debt, the general consensus tends to be that it's a totally acceptable form to finance things that you want, and it's a normal thing to do. Very few of us are, for example, able to buy a house without any type of a mortgage. And this has become a norm in all over the world. Various options of credit is actually advertised to us on a daily basis for smaller or bigger purchases. And all this seems to be totally fine. Debt. One of the main drivers of our economy for it to function and grow. But let's actually have a closer look. What does all this mean? So what is debt good for? Debt can be used to reach some type of a goal that requires financing much faster. For most young adults getting their first home, buying it with pure cash in the modern world is pretty hard. It is doable, but it requires patience that very few people have anymore nowadays, as there are much faster ways how to reach the goal that you want to get to. Another example is for companies to finance some of their costs and projects through debt so that they don't fully run out of cash. There are many who say there's something called a good debt or a bad debt. A good debt tends to be something that you buy an asset that usually increases in value over time, and a classical example is a home or a house. But a bad debt is quite the opposite. It tends to depreciate in value over time, and a good example for this one is a car. There are ways how to increase wealth using debt in the long run if used smartly, but from the perspective of personal finance, I don't see many positive ways how to actually use debt in my opinion. The only way, in my opinion, that you could use debt in personal finance is having a mortgage, but even this has its limits. The bad side of debt. First of all, what I want to say is that I'm not by all means a zero debt crusader. There is a way to use debt in the world, but in the world of personal finance or in the level of one individual, this has become far from a healthy way to finance your lifestyle. This is the main problem with debt in the modern world. Your lifestyle is rarely on par with your income. And to solve the issue of getting what you want, when you want, well, debt comes to rescue. The instant gratification mindset is the main driver of getting into more debt than you should. It is an easy thing to go to when an urge or an impulse of need got the hold of you. It is also made so easy for us to use, as it's usually only a few clicks away, but the aftermath is something you don't get rid of that easy, as it usually costs us time and health to get rid of it. The risk of taking debt is something that people don't quite often understand until you're actually in the hole trying to climb out of it. There are not many things as an individual we can use debt for to actually generate wealth without taking a huge risk. That's the reason why I think a reasonable mortgage is the only acceptable form of debt to have as an individual. So when to use debt then? This part I understand depends much on how your taxes work and where you live, because this is a bit more advanced way of doing finances in general. I mentioned now multiple times that you shouldn't use debt as an individual to generate wealth. Reason being that companies or some type of legal entities tend to have a much better taxing system that can be utilized over an individual's. In the picture you can see the structure I will use to try to avoid risk as an individual regarding debt. What this shows is your wealth in total, the large ball, you as an individual, and the legal entity that you would own, but functions as a separate entity of you. You as an individual have a mortgage in it, an occasional credit card payment you need to pay when booking flight tickets online that you pay fully off next month. This should be all the debt you have as an individual. The legal entity or company is where the things get more interesting. This part is where you invest, take debt against assets it owns, and reinvest the debt or gains. The legal entity is the one that is taking the risk of debt, not you as an individual directly. What this means is that you take out money from the legal entity to yourself when you need to, in form of dividend or other payment forms, but other than that, all the risky investing is dealt by the legal entity. Another aspect of this is that the low-risk investing is still done as an individual, meaning your pension funds and low-cost index funds. That is funded by the high-risk investing returns done by the legal entity and your income. This is all more advanced financing, and it's probably not for all of us. But it's a good structure to remember if you want to step up your investing and you're ready for some bit more risk and hopefully a larger reward at the same time. For most people, investing into our pension funds and index funds is more than enough, and there's no need to take this type of risks. Just remember, our individual investments should be done from our income and not use debt to increase the investment level. Please leave a comment below, how do you actually use debt currently? And if you don't have any debt, what made you make this decision then? In the same time, also hit the like and subscribe button and visit silmis.com where you can find all this information in written form also. But let's continue. The crazy part of that people tend to not even notice. Debt is baked into our everyday lives even though we don't always even see it. The alarming thing is that people tend to confuse debt with wealth. Want to go buy a new TV and is given the option of paying this in small monthly installments over the next 6 months. But you get to take the TV home today. You get to take the TV home straight away, but in the end you pay a much higher price on the TV. The instant gratification mindset society we live in makes this choice totally rational and normal. The only issue is debt start accumulating from all over the places, and when we're not paying attention, this becomes a recipe for financial struggles to start happening. Our everyday lives and even our long-term employment paths are driven by debt in many parts of the world. This is especially, for example, in the US, where you pay such a high price for education that you will use multiple annual incomes just to get this paid back. This is one way to force people into the employment market as a safer way to pay the debt by getting a job. But technically what we are paying is money that is printed by machines day and night and has technically no value in the end. The value is how you see it as the user of the debt. Was the education worth it? Or was the hurry to get the new TV such a great value that it was worth paying the higher price for it? The effect of debt can be visualized in your life in the following way. In this ball is the world you live in without debt. You have the space to stretch and make changes into the direction you are going. The more debt you have as an individual, the less space you have to move and make changes. Simply put, your ball gets smaller as long as you have debt, as you are forced to pay it back one way or another. What people do not see quite often regarding debt is exactly this. The world shrinks around you as you are forced to stay in a job you hate or keep working full-time even if part-time will suit your lifestyle much better. Your ability to react to volatility in life becomes much less flexible as the amount of stress when volatility happens increases. Volatility can come in many different forms: financial, health, war, worldwide pandemic, or family members' health. Volatility is something that will happen. There is no way to avoid this in life. The question is, how much are you willing to take risk as an individual, as the crystal ball to tell us when something is happening doesn't simply exist. Want to have more flexibility and less stress as an individual, or you want to use debt and get what you want straight away and shrink the world you're actually living in. This is the choice we have between instant gratification and debt. Thank you and see you in the next one.